The storm rolled in like it had a score to settle. Dust swept through the cracked main street of Dry Bell, blinding and bitter, peeling faded paint off old storefronts and whistling through broken window panes like a curse. It was near midnight, but the saloon burned gold from within, its swinging doors rattling from laughter, boots, and fists slamming whiskey bottles against warped tables. Ezra McAllister stood just outside, the brim of his sweat-stained hat low over his eyes, collar pulled high against the grit. His boots were caked with dirt and regret. In his hand was a worn leather satchel, the last of what was left of his father's land, his cattle, and the blood he'd poured into a dream now 6 feet under. Inside the saloon, men howled like animals. He didn't want to be there. Hell, he didn't want to be anywhere. But whiskey was cheaper than bullets tonight. He stepped in. The noise hit him first. Heat too. Then the smell, sour breath, stale beer, and sweat soaked deep into the floorboards. Cards slapped, dice rolled, and music bled from a warped piano, the tune just out of tune enough to be irritating. Ezra moved like a ghost. No one looked twice. He liked it that way. But then he saw it. 3 women, standing on a makeshift platform, shackled at the wrists, mud on their hems, hair matted. One of them had blood caked at the corner of her mouth. Another, blonde, skin freckled raw by the sun, stared out into the crowd with a look that dared someone to try her. The third trembled visibly, eyes on the floor. A man in a bowler hat, red-cheeked and soaked in ale, bellowed from beside the platform. Next up, 3 for the price of 1 tonight, boys. Wives, maids, whatever you fancy. We call this a frontier bundle. The room roared. Ezra didn't move. One of the women, the blonde, looked at him. Just for a second. Her lip curled. Not in fear. Not in plea. But defiance. It lit a fuse somewhere deep inside him. Something old. Something buried. "Do I hear $20?" the auctioneer barked. 20. 10 for just the little one, if she ain't to your taste. Laughter. Catcalls. Someone tossed a silver dollar that bounced off the platform. The trembling girl flinched. Ezra moved. The floor creaked beneath his boots as he approached. The bartender didn't even look up. Nobody did. Until he spoke. "I'll take all 3. Silence. You could have heard a loud sneeze. The auctioneer blinked. "What did you say?" Ezra stepped forward, voice steady. "I said I'll take all 3. The blonde smiled. Not with joy. With curiosity. The auctioneer scratched his neck. "You got the money, rancher? Or you fixin' to be a fool and a corpse?" Ezra dropped the leather satchel on the table beside the man with a heavy thump. It spilled open just enough to flash stacks of green. Tied neat. Clean money. More than most folks saw in a year. The saloon erupted into chaos. Hell, he's lost his mind. Ranch must be cursed. Maybe he's building himself a harem. Ezra ignored them. He looked at the women. The blonde raised an eyebrow. The smallest girl wouldn't meet his gaze. The third, the one with blood, just watched him like she was reading a ledger he didn't know he'd written. The auctioneer spat and stepped back. "They're yours. Ain't my soul to carry." The shackles clanked as the women were unbound. Ezra picked up the satchel, nodded once, and motioned to the door. No words. Just movement. They followed. Outside, the wind had died. As if waiting to see what happened next. They climbed into his wagon. The horses whinnied nervously, sensing something in the air that man hadn't caught yet. Ezra took the reins in silence. The women huddled behind him, not speaking. It was an hour's ride to his ranch. Dry. Quiet. Cold. Coyotes yipped somewhere far off. One of the wagon wheels creaked with each turn, a metronome for the unraveling of something larger than any of them yet understood. "You're either stupid or desperate," the blonde said finally. Her voice was sharp. Seasoned. She didn't flinch as the wind kicked up again. "Maybe both." Ezra didn't turn. "What's your name?" "May." He waited. The others stayed silent. He tried again. "Yours." The bloodied one gave a short answer. "Nora." The youngest girl hugged her knees tighter. Ezra didn't press. "You think you just saved us?" May asked dry. "That you bought yourself some redemption along with 3 women? That it's all going to work out now?" Ezra said nothing. May leaned closer. "You didn't save us, cowboy. You just picked a fight you ain't ready for." He brought the wagon to a stop in front of a house that had seen better days. Roof sagging. Porch warped. But still standing. Like him. May jumped down on her own. Nora followed stiffly. The young girl hesitated before stepping off. Ezra unlocked the door, let them inside first. The fireplace was cold, dust thick on every shelf. A chair creaked as Nora sat down, without asking. May lit a lamp like she owned the place. The youngest girl lingered near the door. Ezra dropped the satchel on the table. "You can sleep in the rooms upstairs," he said, voice gravel. "There's food in the pantry. Ain't much, but it's yours. You think this ends with a roof and some beans?" May said, arms crossed. Ezra met her gaze. "I think you're safer here than in that saloon." She laughed once. Not kindly. "Safe? You think the men who sold us are going to let this go?" "I paid. Paid the wrong people." Ezra turned away. He felt the ache in his ribs, old scars flaring. This wasn't a rescue. He didn't know what it was yet. But something inside had snapped. And once something snapped, it never quite went back the way it was. He stoked the fire. It hissed like it didn't want to wake. May leaned against the wall. "You got a name, cowboy?" "Ezra." "Ezra," she repeated, like tasting the sound. "Hope you've got bullets, Ezra. 'Cause what's coming, it ain't gonna be pretty." Nora stood, walked past both of them, and climbed the stairs without a word. The youngest girl finally spoke. Soft. "My name's June." Ezra turned to her. She looked 14, maybe 15, though the lines in her eyes hinted at a lifetime lived too fast. "I'm not afraid," she added, though her voice shook. "You should be," May muttered, watching the window. "We all should." Ezra didn't sleep that night. He sat on the porch with a rifle across his lap, watching the road. The moon was a half thing in the sky. The wind whispered through dead grass. He didn't pray. He didn't believe in much anymore. But something had started. He didn't know why he did it. Maybe guilt. Maybe rage. Maybe he just got tired of seeing good people get swallowed by bad ones while everyone else looked away. Maybe that blonde woman was right. Maybe he was a damn fool. But when he saw her on that stage, when he saw all three of them, something had cracked open. He'd walked into the saloon, a broken man, and walked out a target. A creak behind him. May stepped onto the porch, blanket over her shoulders. "You gonna tell me why you did it?" "No." She studied him in the dim. "You know they'll come for us." "I know." She nodded. "Then I hope you shoot better than you talk." The silence stretched between them, alive and uneasy. A horse neighed somewhere out in the dark. Ezra stood up slowly, eyes narrowing. May's fingers tightened on the blanket. Ezra stepped off the porch and into the dirt. He didn't see anything, but he felt it. Someone was out there, watching, waiting. The wind picked up again, whispering warnings no one wanted to hear. And the night held its breath. May didn't go back inside. She stood beside Ezra on the porch, eyes scanning the black stretch beyond the fence line. Somewhere out there a branch snapped, not the kind wind breaks, but the sharp crack of a boot heel pressing too hard in the wrong place. Ezra raised the rifle. "Relax," May muttered, pulling the blanket tighter around her. "They're not coming yet." "You sound sure." "I've met men like them." Her tone went dry. "They like an audience when they burn things down." Ezra didn't lower the rifle. His knuckles were white where he gripped the stock. Inside the house, a floorboard creaked. June's silhouette appeared in the upstairs window, watching silently. Nora hadn't come back down since they arrived. The place was holding its breath, and so was Ezra. May glanced at him. "What did you lose?" He didn't answer. She stepped forward, just enough that the firelight from the window lit her face. "No man drops that kind of coin on strangers unless he's burying something." "What was it, Ezra?" "Wife. Child." Ezra's jaw clenched. "Land," he said at last. "And a brother. To the drought. And debt." She nodded, not mocking. Just understanding. "Thought it'd be worse." Ezra kept watching the fence. "There's no worse. Just slow." A sudden sound, sharp and metallic, rang out. Both turned. The wind had blown the barn door open again. Ezra exhaled. Still, he didn't put the rifle down. "I'll fix the latch tomorrow," he muttered. May didn't move. "You should fix more than that." "What's that supposed to mean?" "This house," she said, voice low. "It looks like you gave up in it. Like you stopped believing it was worth the trouble." Ezra turned toward her. "And yet here you are." She met his stare. "Not by choice, remember?" Ezra almost said something back, something sharp, but then Nora's voice cut through the house like a blade. "Get in here." He bolted inside, rifle still raised. May followed, fast and silent. In the center of the kitchen table was a knife. A clean, sharp kitchen blade. Nothing fancy, but the way it was laid out, pointed toward the door, was deliberate. Found it on the windowsill upstairs, Nora said flatly. Someone left it there. Handle still warm. Ezra froze. May's eyes narrowed. We've got a shadow. More than one, Nora added. Someone's testing your doors. Seeing what sticks. Ezra turned and locked the back entrance. His hands moved fast now, efficient. Nora leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Her bruises were starting to bloom darker under her eyes. How long until they bring a match to this place? I don't plan to give them the chance. You have a plan? May asked. Ezra didn't answer. The next morning came slow and gray. The sky looked like a stretched bedsheet, low and colorless. Ezra saddled his horse early, rifle strapped to his back. He didn't explain. He just told them to keep the doors locked and stay away from the windows. May followed him out to the barn anyway. You don't trust us, she said. I trust you to survive. That's enough. She stepped in front of his horse. You go riding into town. You're walking into the lion's mouth. Then I'll see how sharp its teeth really are. May's jaw tightened. You think you're some kind of savior? Some white knight out of a dime novel. You bought 3 women. That makes you a problem, not a hero. Ezra leaned in close. I never claimed to be either. He mounted and rode off without looking back. It took 40 minutes to reach Dry Bell again. The saloon looked worse in daylight, like the morning after a funeral no one wanted to attend. 2 men were already passed out on the porch. The door swung open at his touch. Inside, silence. The stink of stale beer clung to the walls. He didn't go to the bar. He went upstairs. Room 2, the one with the cracked window and the rope marks on the floorboards. The auctioneer had lived there, a coward with a big hat and a small spine. Ezra kicked the door open. Inside, the room was empty, except for a sheet of paper nailed to the bedpost. Asterisk, you took what wasn't yours. We're coming to collect. Midnight. Leave M on the porch or burn with M, asterisk. No signature, just a black stamp of a crow. Ezra stared at it for a long time, long enough for his stomach to twist. He rode hard back to the ranch. When he returned, June was boiling water. Nora was oiling the hinges of a shuttered window. May sat at the kitchen table cleaning her fingernails with the same knife that had been left in the window the night before. They sent a message, Ezra said, tossing the paper onto the table. May glanced at it. Of course they did. Midnight. That gives us 12 hours, Nora said. To do what? Decide, May said. Do we run? No, June said quietly without looking up. They all turned to her. I'm tired of running. May studied her, then stood slowly. You're a kid. June's voice sharpened. I've seen more men die than you've seen sunrises. Silence again. Ezra looked around the room. If they come, they'll bring fire. We got 3 rifles, a scattergun, and no neighbors for 5 miles. Not enough, Nora said. Then we make it enough. The next hours moved like lightning trapped in a bottle. May pulled up floorboards to reveal a pair of old dynamite sticks left over from Ezra's father's days working the mine. June set snares in the tall grass beyond the porch. Nora climbed onto the roof and lined bottles along the edge, glass alarms for any movement. Ezra fortified the barn. If they failed, that would be their fallback. Inside it, under the hay, was a storm shelter. Big enough for 3, not 4. He didn't tell them that. As the sun began to fall, shadows lengthened across the fields. The wind picked up again, dry and nervous. Ezra sat on the porch with his rifle. May stood beside him, her face unreadable. You always live like this? She asked. Just since the world started taking pieces of me. She nodded, then looked out toward the horizon. You're going to die for us, aren't you? Ezra didn't answer. You shouldn't, she added. You barely know us. He looked at her then. Really looked. Not at the grit on her cheeks or the fire in her stare, but at the fear she was trying to bury under all of it. I don't need to know you to know what's right. She shook her head. You're going to get us all killed. Maybe, but I'll die knowing I didn't leave you on that stage. May went quiet. From the field, Nora's voice rang out. Horsemen, 3 of them, moving fast. Ezra stood. They're early. The others scrambled to their positions. The traps were set. The house was locked. The rifles loaded. But Ezra's gut told him this wasn't the main event. The 3 riders slowed as they approached the fence. Dust clouded their faces. The one in front wore a long duster and a black bandana over his mouth. Ezra stepped forward. Alone. We don't want to die tonight, the rider said. Then turn around. You got one chance, rancher. One. Give him back. Or what comes after won't be clean. Ezra lifted his rifle an inch. The man in the duster tilted his head. You think a name like McAllister means something? Not out here. Out here, you're just another fool standing between profit and progress. Ezra smiled grimly. Then I'll make the cost real steep. The riders didn't answer. Just turned and rode off, kicking dust and silence into the air. May appeared behind him. They were scouts. I know. You still got that shelter in the barn? She asked. Ezra paused. Yeah. You planning to use it? No. May looked at him hard. Then I'm staying too. He didn't say thank you. He didn't need to. Inside the house, the lamp flickered as the wind rose. Midnight was coming, and with it a reckoning. The wind howled louder by the hour, carrying with it the dry, electric promise of violence. Ezra stood by the barn doors, lantern held low. Dust swirled at his boots. A single breath of the night air tasted like iron. Midnight was close. Inside the house, May paced. Nora sat at the kitchen table, sharpening a blade slowly, rhythmically, like she'd done it 100 times before. June leaned near the window, eyes narrowed against the dark. No one spoke. They didn't need to. At 11:47, a distant rumble began. It wasn't thunder. Ezra stepped out from the barn and climbed to the roof, boots thudding dully against the old wood. He peered through the rusted spyglass he'd pulled from his father's belongings an hour earlier. What he saw made his chest go hollow. They weren't coming on horseback. A wagon train rolled across the plain. 4 of them, wide black enclosed. Lanterns swayed from each corner, casting a hellish glow over the cracked earth. Behind them rode at least a dozen men, armed and armored in scraps of old militia gear. One had a torch already lit. Ezra dropped down without a word. They've got numbers, he said once back inside. More than we planned for. How many? Nora asked, already rising. 4 wagons. Maybe 15 riders. Maybe more. May snorted, tight and bitter. Hope you packed enough graves. Ezra moved to the front door and braced the rifle against the frame. They're not taking this place. We might not either, June muttered. But she loaded her weapon anyway. The tension inside the house was strangling. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of the lamp, felt amplified. Ezra's heart pounded not just with fear, but with something deeper. Guilt. Duty. A fury that had sat buried under his ribs for years and now clawed its way up with ragged nails. By the time the wagons pulled within 50 yards, the ranch was dead silent. Then someone called out. A man's voice. Sharp. Jovial. Cruel. McAllister. You in there? Ezra didn't answer. Got ourselves a misunderstanding to clear up. 3 gals you purchased weren't yours to buy. They're ours. Rightful property. May stiffened. June grabbed the curtain tighter. Nora drew the hammer back on her pistol. We give you one chance, the voice continued. 1. Send him out. We walk away. Keep M, and you've bought yourself a war you ain't got coin for. Ezra stepped forward. Opened the door. Just enough for the barrel of his rifle to catch moonlight. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. Just fired. The first shot struck the lantern on the lead wagon. Glass shattered. Flame danced. One of the men screamed as oil caught, and the fire leapt to the canvas roof. Chaos erupted. Gunfire shattered the quiet like a lightning strike. Bullets slammed into the porch posts, ripped through shutters, and punched into the house's thick walls. May dragged June down behind the table. Nora dove across the hallway, landing behind a stack of crates Ezra had dragged in as makeshift cover. Ezra rolled and came up firing again. Smoke stunned the air, which splintered around them. Outside, the second wagon caught fire. May tossed Ezra a fresh cartridge box without a word. Then she stood, aimed through the broken window, and dropped a rider clean off his horse. You know, she shouted over the din, I thought you were a fool, McAllister. Turns out I might have been wrong. Save that for later, he barked. Nora fired twice and ducked as return fire shattered the window frame above her. They're trying to circle. Someone get to the side. June sprang toward the kitchen, rifle in hand. A bullet punched into the wall beside her head, spraying plaster. She kept moving. Out the side door, across the porch, into the dark. Ezra shouted after her, then stopped. He couldn't afford the distraction. May laid down covering fire, smooth and mechanical. She didn't panic. She didn't miss. One of the riders broke through the fence and charged the porch. Ezra caught him in the chest just before he reached the steps. The body hit the dirt hard and didn't move. Smoke poured from the barn. Ezra's stomach dropped. The hay! He bolted from the door, sprinting low. A bullet grazed his thigh. He didn't flinch. Just kept running until he reached the barn. He yanked the door open, expecting an inferno. Instead, he found June coughing in the smoke. "I didn't light it," she cried. "One of them threw a bottle." He pulled her out, dragging her across the yard to the well. He dunked a bucket, splashed her down, then turned to see May standing on the porch, covering them both. "Back inside," she barked. Ezra didn't argue. By the time they re-entered, 3 of the enemy wagons were ablaze. Only one remained. The riders were thinning. Some had fled, others lay in the dust. But from behind the last wagon, a voice called out. Not the loud, cruel voice from before. This one was worse. Colder. "You should have handed them over, McAllister." Ezra stiffened. He knew that voice. Jeb Harden. Once a rancher. Now a trafficker, a killer, a man who made gold from misery. "You've got 5 minutes," Jeb said. "Then I start skinning survivors." May didn't blink. "I'll kill him." Ezra stared at the wall. "No, I will." He stepped back outside, hands empty. Rifle slung over his shoulder. Smoke curled around him like ghosts. "I know you, Harden," he called. "I remember that limp." A shape moved from behind the wagon. Jeb was tall, wide in the shoulders, face hidden by a scarf but unmistakable in the way he carried himself, like every man had a price, and he'd already bought your death. "Thought you died in Black Hollow," Ezra said. "Thought you'd never crawl out of that bottle," Jeb shot back. "Looks like we're both wrong. You've got no claim here. I've got gold. That's all the claim I need. You got fire and blood. I've got walls and grit." Jeb sneered. "I've got men." Ezra nodded. "Not for long." Behind Jeb, the barn exploded. One of the dynamite sticks, set under the water barrel near the fence, had caught the rising fire. The blast knocked over the last wagon and sent 2 men flying. May fired again. Another rider dropped. From the shadows near the shed, Nora stepped forward, blood on her arm, but steady. "Told you," she called to Jeb. "We don't run anymore." Jeb's composure cracked. He yanked his pistol, aimed at Ezra. A shot rang out. Jeb stumbled. June stood behind him, the rifle trembling in her hands. He turned, snarled. Then Ezra fired. The bullet hit Jeb between the eyes. He dropped like a sack of stone. Silence. Ezra stood there, chest heaving, as the fires burned down and the air filled with the sharp tang of cordite and ash. One by one, the women emerged from cover. Faces smudged, hands shaking but alive. Ezra stared at the body in the dirt, at the black scarf, at the boots covered in blood. He said nothing. May approached him, slowly, rifle still at the ready. "That the man who started all this?" Ezra nodded. "Good," she said, then spat on Jeb's corpse. Nora leaned on the porch rail, eyes scanning the black horizon. "What if more come?" Ezra didn't answer right away. "Then let M." June exhaled, slow and shaking. Then the wind shifted, carrying with it a new sound. Hoofbeats. From the south. Still far, but getting closer. The hoofbeats grew louder, steady, relentless, like a war drum calling forth judgment. Ezra stood in the yard, boots planted in blackened dirt, rifle heavy in his hands. The others stayed behind him, silent shadows framed by the rising dawn. The wind carried the scent of ash and gunpowder, mixed now with the coppery tang of blood and the charred sweetness of burnt hay. Ezra didn't flinch. He wasn't sure if it was courage or that familiar numbness creeping back into his bones. The riders crested the southern ridge just as the sun broke the horizon. 15 of them, maybe 20. Dust cloaked their legs like ghost smoke. No banners, no emblems. Just long coats, low hats, and the sharp gleam of steel tucked close to the hip. Ezra narrowed his eyes. These weren't Jeb's men. They weren't lawmen either. The lead rider slowed and raised a hand, signaling the others to halt. He dismounted with practiced ease and began walking toward the ranch gate, slow, deliberate steps, like a man who knew he was being watched by a dozen fingers hovering over triggers. He stopped just short of the fence. "My name's Elias Boone," he said, voice like dry paper over gravel. "Heard about what happened out here." Ezra kept the rifle aimed low, but his finger was tight against the guard. Heard from who? Word gets around fast when someone burns down half a crew and kills Jeb Harden. Ezra didn't blink. We didn't start it. Boone's lips tugged into something that might have been a smile. Didn't say you did. Just said you finished it. Behind Ezra, June emerged from a porch. Face bruised, bandaged across the temple. She kept a steady pace, shotgun at her side. What's it matter to you? Boone didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on Ezra. Depends. What are you planning to do next? Ezra hesitated. He hadn't thought that far ahead. They'd survive the night. That had been the goal. Everything after felt like borrowed time. We rebuild, he said finally. We protect our own. Boone nodded slowly. Good answer. Another rider approached from the rear line, younger, lean, eyes sharp as barbed wire. He leaned close to Boone and whispered something. Boone nodded, then looked back at Ezra. You got enemies, McAllister. Real ones. The kind that wear suits and write ledgers while men like Jeb do the dirty work. They won't like what you did here. Ezra didn't look away. They can come tell me themselves. They won't. They'll send more men like Jeb. Meaner. Better paid. And when that fails, they'll burn this whole county just to make an example. Ezra felt a pulse in his jaw, a deep tick of something ancient and wild. Then let him try. Boone considered him. You ever think about taking this fight to them? Not just defend. Hunt. A long silence followed. May stepped down from a porch, crossing the charred yard, until she stood beside Ezra. We're not killers, she said. Boone raised an eyebrow. You sure about that? May didn't answer. He turned, gesturing toward the ridge. You got a story now. People listen. Some will want to join. Some will want to use you. And some will want to bury you before you get a chance to speak. Ezra let the silence stretch. The sun was higher now, casting golden light across the destruction. The barn was half collapsed, the fence torn. The yard was a graveyard of scorched wood and twisted iron. But the house still stood. The girls were alive. And Ezra, for the first time in years, felt something deeper than guilt churning in his chest. Conviction. We'll stay here, he said. For now. Boone nodded again. Then you'll need help. He turned back to his horse, mounted in one fluid motion, and tipped his hat. A storm's coming, McAllister. Bigger than what rolled in last night. When it hits, you'll want to know who's standing beside you. Then he and his riders wheeled around and vanished into the dust. For a long moment no one spoke. Then June muttered, well, he was cheery. Ezra exhaled and let the tension roll off his shoulders like water. He's right, though. May looked sideways at him. About what? We can't go back to what we were. What were we? Nora asked, stepping out from behind the rain barrel where she'd been listening. Lost, Ezra said. Scared. Waiting to die. June crossed her arms. And now? Ezra looked around at the smoldering wreckage, the hoofprints stamped into the earth like scars, the sun rising over a land that had been soaked in blood and flame not 12 hours earlier. Now we're something else. They spent the rest of the morning in silence, rebuilding what they could. Ezra hammered the fence back into place, post by post, his hands blistered, knuckles raw. May sifted through the barn ruins, pulling out salvageable tools, while June and Nora dug shallow graves for the dead men, not out of mercy, but to keep the buzzards away. They worked like a team, unspoken, synchronized. Painfully human. By sundown, they sat on the porch steps, sweat-streaked and sore. Ezra passed around a bottle of old rye, the last of the stash his father had buried beneath the kitchen floor. No one toasted. No one needed to. The fireflies came out early that night, blinking across the yard like tiny, stubborn stars. You know, May said eventually, my old man used to say there's two kinds of people in the world, those who build fences and those who tear 'em down. Ezra nodded. Which was he? Neither. Just like to watch others do it. Nora chuckled under her breath. Sounds about right. June leaned back against the porch rail, staring up at the darkening sky. They'll be back. Not just men like Jeb. Maybe worse. Ezra looked at her. I'm counting on it. They all turned toward him. He let the silence hang for a beat. Then, this land ain't just dirt. It's memory. Blood. We either defend it and become something new, or we let it rot and become just like them. May's voice was low, wary. You talkin' war? I'm talkin' legacy. A long wind swept across the plains, bending the tall grass and whispering through the broken fence. Something about it felt different, like the land itself had shifted. Ezra rose and walked down the steps into the yard. He looked around at what was left, then farther, to the horizon. I was a ghost for years, he said, letting the world pass by, drowning in what I'd lost. But this, he turned back to them, this ain't about what we lost anymore. It's about what we're willing to fight for. May stood slowly. And if they come with more guns, then we give them more graves. The wind picked up, stirring the embers still smoldering in the barn's skeleton. Sparks rose into the night like fireflies. Far off, past the southern ridge, another glint of movement flickered, distant, faint. Maybe riders. Maybe nothing. Ezra didn't look away. Not this time. He reached down and tightened the strap on his rifle. Let 'em come, he said again, voice calm, steady. We'll be ready. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. We're not done yet. This is just the beginning.